Let's bring in this morning's Roundtable now. Zoe Clark is here, Program Director for Michigan Radio. Nolan Fenley, above her there, the editorial page editor at the Detroit News. To the right there, Stephen Henderson is the host of Detroit Today on WDET. And Steve Mitchell, the pollster and analyst from Mitchell Research. Steve, I want to stay with the pandemic here for just a second and its impact on these upcoming midterm elections. How central do you expect pandemic response, decisions, and policies to be to the elections? Or does it begin to fade in the rearview mirror by then?
I think aspects of it will always be part of the discussion in 2022. I'm not convinced it's going to be as an important issue as everyone thinks. There was a comment yesterday or 2 days ago from the head of Moderna who believes that the next variant is going to be even weaker than the Omicron variant. And in fact, we may be at the end of the entire pandemic. If that's the case, then there'll be other issues that come into play.
Nolan, I think there are a lot of Republicans lying in wait to go after, say, for instance, Governor Whitmer on the way that she responded to the pandemic. Do you expect it to be front and center?
I don't think so. I think hopefully by the time we get to November, this has all started to wane in a big way. But if you notice, if you track her numbers since the fall, when she stopped really actively trying to manage the pandemic, her numbers started rising. And I think there's a lot of Democrats around the country who took a look at that. And, that's why you've seen mask mandates and other things starting to lift over the past week or so without any real change in the pandemic or the science. So I think, had the election be held last November, it would have been a different story. I think this November, it may not be as big an issue.
Well, then maybe that, Zoe, the old saying, it's the economy, stupid. Is that where we go back to, as we often do on elections, and at a time when inflation is running the way it is that what ends up deciding what happens in November?
I think at this point, it's hard to believe that it isn't, right? And you have even Democrats, moderate Democrats, coming out just this week. In fact, Congressman Kildee and Alyssa Slotkin here, Congresswoman Slotkin from Michigan, co-sponsoring a gas tax. And so we are definitely seeing that actually Republicans and Democrats agreeing, I think, going into the election. They want to put COVID behind them, although Republicans are going to continue to bring up Whitmer's handling of COVID because this seems to be an issue that is winning at least some independent voters for them.
Yeah, the ones that decide most of our elections in Michigan. Stephen, what do you expect everything to turn on this year, or is it too complicated to boil it down to one or two things?
I think it is more about money than it is about COVID at this point, and inflation is giving the Democrats fits. They have not found a way to talk, I think, about the broader trends in the economy. I mean, the strange dynamic where you've got all kinds of things booming, including wage growth that we haven't seen in a long time, and of course the stock market is going crazy. But inflation is what people are seeing when they go to the store, and there isn't a good way to combat that. Democrats are going to have to come up with a narrative that talks about these things in the economy that are actually working, and some of them working way better than they have in a really long time, and de-emphasize the inflation.
Well, Steve, if I put you in charge of both sides, if you're the Democrats, you want this election to be about what? And if you're the Republicans, you want it to be about what?
Both want it to be about the president of the United States. The Democrats want it to be about the former president, Donald Trump, and the Republicans want it to be about the current president, Joe Biden. It's hard to believe that Joe Biden right now has a lower job approval than Donald Trump did at a comparable period. So that's what this election is going to be about. Both parties are going to frame it about Biden and or Donald Trump.
And we know, too, to that point, that the party in power in the White House in midterms tends not to do very well. So, I mean, this is going to be really fascinating to watch about, Biden being at the top of the ticket but his name not actually being there.
And as Steve has pointed out on the program before, that's often bad news for a governor, because they don't often come up in the middle of a midterm with their own party in power as well. Nolan, we've watched a number of challenges to the redistricting maps fail. There's still one or two, I think, still hanging out there. But is this it? Do we basically have a handle on who's running where as we get now not that far away from the election? These decisions kind of need to be poured.
Yeah, I would hope so. I mean, we got till April 9th for these candidates to file, so I would doubt that it's going to be thrown into even more chaos. I mean, it's the interesting part of this whole redistricting process to me at this point is it doesn't seem like Democrats got what they paid for in passing this ballot measure in 2018. Congress could very well end up, if it's a big Republican year, could end up our delegation with a Republican majority. And I don't think that was the intent of Democrats when they pushed this through. I don't know about the State House and State Senate. Steve Mitchell probably know more about that than I do. But the maps don't look that bad for Republicans.
Those maps look very good for Republicans, and the Senate map is more difficult. But given the year, I suspect Republicans will retain control of both houses.
Yeah, in fact, Steve Henderson, one of the things that we're already seeing that's going to happen is you're going to have you got two sitting Democrats having to run against each other in Levin and Stevens. What are the more interesting races looking like to you now that we start to understand what this landscape looks like?
I mean, I think we're starting to see some people who have not raised their hands before say that they're interested now that they look at the lines. I think that one of the lessons of this map is if you take political interest out of the equation to the extent that we did, what you end up with is something that makes a lot of different people really unhappy, and maybe that's the test we ought to be using. The people who are not happy with this map include both Republicans and Democrats, and we're just gonna have to figure out what the communities that they created are going to look like once people start to vote. I predict that in 2 or 3 cycles, people will think a lot more of these maps than they have of the maps that were drawn by partisans in the past. But it may take a while, and there's going to be some bumps and bruises. You're going to lose some incumbents, no question, because of the way this was done.
But you're right, some interesting people getting in, and I want to make clear Portia Roberson has assured me that she is not running for Congress simply to get out of being on Flashpoint. She told me that's absolutely not the case. Zoe, what do you what looks like the most interesting thing to you as you look out at these new lines?
Well, I mean, just the fact that you have congressional districts where there weren't necessarily huge names to jump in right away, open seats.
Yes.
I mean, in the 10th, you finally had John James jump in, versus then you have these districts with 2 incumbents going after each other. But again, I'm fascinated by the Alyssa Slotkin seat. And for me, over the past, every election cycle since she won, that district has been so incredible, sometimes going for Trump and for her. Thus why folks like moderate Democrats are looking to Nancy Pelosi in the House, bringing up this gas tax, moratorium. And so watching what these moderate Democrats have to do come this midterm is just going to be fascinating.
We've got is that the Fenley Hound that is joining in right now? I love it. It seems to be. Steve, your reflections on what you just heard.
Which Steve?
I'm sorry, Steve Mitchell. You jump in there on these new lines and new races.
I think it's got a couple of fascinating races. You've got one over in West Michigan between Fred Upton and Bill Huizenga. Fred's the dean of the Michigan delegation. Yeah. The only thing that might save Fred Upton from being defeated in the primary is the fact that there's a third candidate besides he and Congressman Bill Huizenga named Steve Carra. Carra's been endorsed by President Trump, and that actually might save Upton from losing. If it's a 2-way match, there's no way that Bill Huizenga does not win that race. Then you've got the Andy Levin versus Haley Stevens race, 2 incumbents in Macomb County, another fascinating race. I put my money on Levin there. That's a long-time name in Michigan politics.
Sure
So, and Debbie Dingell's got to move, and
Yep.
and Kildee's running again in an interesting race. It's fascinating all over the state.
It is, and I'm going to look forward to watching it all with the four of you and Nolan's dog. Thanks, gang.
And the dog's perspective.
I know, I love it. Thanks, gang.